Hi, my name is Kate. This is my channel, and this is kind of an apology for saying back in August that I was going to come back and then not coming back. There's also going to be a quick rundown of my favourite books that I read in 2019. I think it's 9, which is 4 science fiction, 1 fantasy, 2 non-fiction, and 2 romances. So I'm going to quickly go through those, and I don't think I'm going to do goals for 2020. So this will just be what I liked best in 2019. I'm going to start with the fantasy because it was my favourite book of the year, I think, and that was The Raven Tower by Ann Leckie. I think that this was a bit of a divisive book. I think a lot of people were expecting it to be the ancillary books, but a fantasy, and it was not that. And as much as I loved the ancillary books, I think this one is actually better. So this is a fantasy, and it's told on quite a small scale. It's not a big sweeping story. It's a very small story, and it's told from the point of view of a sentient rock, and it is written in the second person. So it's not really a book for everybody, I don't think, but I loved it. I found it beautiful and really interesting from a storytelling point of view. Okay, so that was my favourite. The rest I think are a little bit, no, I probably have a top 3, but I'm just going to go through with the genres. So next I'm going to do my science fiction, and that is The Light Brigade by Kameron Hurley. Kameron Hurley writes some really intense, hard to read books, and this one was probably the least intense content-wise, but as a story structure, it was quite challenging because it's essentially a time travel book where the main character is flung involuntarily through time repeatedly during a war. They're a soldier during a war, an intergalactic war, and being flung through time in this way is really difficult to keep track of what's going on in the war, where you are, who's dead and who's not. You get a big emotional horror of a friend dying, and then you get flung through time and they're not dead because you've gone backwards, and you have to pretend like everything is okay because nobody else around you knows that you're going through time, and if you say anything, they'll think you're crazy. So I really enjoyed it, and I particularly loved the way that it looped around in such a way to make the ending the beginning and the beginning the ending, which is something that you can do in time travel really effectively. So The Light Brigade by Kameron Hurley. This is one that I finished on probably the 28th of December, and that is The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. I believe this won the Hugo, or at least it was nominated for the Hugo in 2019. And this one is imagining that the space race happened for a different reason. A meteorite hit the Earth in the late 50s, early 60s, and changed the climate quite dramatically to the point where in a few years humanity will no longer be able to live on Earth, so we push up the space race so that we can get off planet and survive. And it's told from the point of view of a female mathematician, physicist, and wannabe astronaut, and it is about her fight to be included in the astronaut training program. And it was really good. I didn't expect it to have so much discussion. I expected a discussion of gender politics, obviously. I didn't expect the amount of race politics that was in there, though I probably should have, because it was the 50s in America, and that was kind of a big deal. I mean, it still is, but I feel like there was, legal justification for segregation, and so that came up quite a lot, and I did not expect at all the amount of discussion of mental health, particularly anxiety, didn't see that coming at all, and that was really beautifully handled and really appropriate for this story. The next one is Terra Nullius by Claire G. Coleman. Now, this wasn't advertised as a science fiction novel, but it is a science fiction novel because it's about an alien invasion. And it's an extended metaphor for the British invasion and colonisation of Australia, the theft of Australia from the Aboriginal Australians. But it is set in the future, and it's about an alien invasion of Earth. It was beautifully written, very, very powerful, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I think it is probably one of the most important books of the last decade. Terra Nullius. Okay, this is probably my second favourite book of the year. Third favourite, maybe. Like the second and third are quite contentious. They're quite close. But that is A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. This is a far, far, far future science fiction to the point where it's almost a fantasy. It's a fantasy with science fiction trappings, let's call it. And it is about an ambassador from a very small society within this empire who travels to the capital to be the ambassador after her predecessor died under mysterious circumstances, and it's about the machinations and the hijinks around trying to figure out what happened so that you don't fall into the same mistakes, and also just being an ambassador and what that means. The ambassador is quite conflicted in a really lovely way, having always been obsessed and highly interested in the culture of the empire, the capital of the empire, the powerful culture within the empire, but also seeing that culture supersedes their own culture, supersedes everything that they're doing for themselves, that they want, and it is erasing their own identity, and then how that conflict works, loving things that are problematic, essentially, which was interesting to see in a science fiction novel. It's not something that I was expecting to read, but it was beautiful. So I'm going to talk about the romance novels, and so the first one I'm going to talk about is the second or third place of my top 3 favourites of the year, and it's a little bit of nonsense that I really enjoyed, and that is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. It was lovely. So it posits a future where the president, not a future, it's an alternate present, where the president of the United States is not the president that we have at the moment. The president is a woman, not Hillary Clinton, but a woman who has 2 young adult children, one of whom is a son. So he, the first son, falls in love with a Prince of Britain, and he falls in love with him, and it's really sweet, and it's just about what would that actually mean for politics, what would that actually mean for identity politics, for gender and sexuality within the culture, and how would that be received in today's day and age. And it's really sweet, and there's kissing, and I liked it. So Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. And then the second romance novel that I really enjoyed this year, I don't have a physical copy of because I read it as an ebook, and that is The Kiss Quotient by Helen, I think it's pronounced Hoang, Hoang, Helen Hoang, excuse me, and that is also a contemporary romance, which is unusual because I usually read a lot of historical romances, but this was a contemporary about a woman. Now, I don't know if they outright said it or if it was just heavily implied, but she is on the autism spectrum, and she hires a male escort because she believes that she is bad at sex and she wants to learn how to be better at sex, and he has his own dramas about he doesn't really want to be a sex worker. He finds it really uncomfortable and unpleasant, but he has personal and financial dramas. That means that this is the best option for him at the moment. So he's doing the sex worker. He's like, I don't know if this is. He's got a deal where he sees you once, then he doesn't come back. And she wants, obviously, repeat visits because she wants to learn. And so there's this interesting dynamic between the two of them. And it's really sweet. And obviously, they fall in love. And there's a happily ever after because that's what you want in a romance novel. Okay, so that was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. So now I'm going to talk about the two non-fiction books. Now, I had wanted to read in 2019 more books by and about Indigenous Australians. So my two favourite non-fiction books were actually by Indigenous Australians, and they are, I don't have a copy of this one, so I've lent it out to a friend, Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe, and interestingly enough, it was about agriculture. Not a thing that I thought I would ever be interested in or a thing that I would really enjoy, but I did. It was fascinating, talking about how there was agriculture in Australia before the arrival of the Europeans, and that the Europeans recognised what the Indigenous Australians were doing as agriculture. There's lots of excerpts from diaries and letters, etc., of the British at the time of colonisation and invasion, talking about it, and a lot of it was quite impressed by what they could see and what they were experiencing. Didn't understand it a lot of the time, but said, "Oh yeah, they're farming." And then using that, because one of the definitions of terra nullius, land belonging to no one, is that there is no agriculture. So by the British's own definitions, invasion was a breach of law. So really interesting. So Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe, and the second non-fiction book that I want to talk about, and the last book on my list, is Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World by Tyson Yunkaporta. This is a really complex book and it's really quite difficult to explain, but I think the way to explain it is to say it is a critique of Western civilization from the point of view of Indigenous philosophies. So it's taking Indigenous philosophy as the starting point and then observing and discussing Western civilization. Yeah. It was really complex, really quite, I don't want to say academic, but academic, I guess. Cerebral is perhaps a better term. I didn't understand quite a lot of it. I reread sections several times and I'm still iffy if I've understood it correctly, which I think was kind of the point. I think that was the point he was trying to make. So Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta. So those were my favourite books of 2019. I don't think I'm going to set goals in 2020 other than I've set a Goodreads goal, a number of 120 books, which should be more than achievable considering that in 2019 I read 134. And I think the only other goal is that I'm going to let myself read whatever I want to read. I'm not going to try and be the reader that I think I should be and read the books that I think I should. And part of that involves being allowed to give up on books that I'm not enjoying because life is too short. So those were my favourite books of 2019, and hopefully I will be back talking to you again, I hope, and not wait like 5 months. Okay, bye.